This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
The Denver Nuggets, your 2023 NBA champions, with their win over the Miami Heat in game number 5, and potentially another champion tonight in the NHL, and another champion coming up on Sunday. The U.S. Open in PGA is coming up. It is at Los Angeles Country Club. Our job for today is to break down that event by talking to Brandon Gdula, getting his favorite bets over at FanDuel Sportsbook to get you ready for what should be another fun event. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, joined here as mentioned by Brandon Gdula. Check him out on Twitter at Gdula13. He is the senior managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, the NBA Finals have wrapped up. No more Sims for you to run there, but have we gotten any more progress into convincing you to talk WNBA on the show instead?
Sometimes it's good to keep things more as hobbies than work. So you have to do a little bit more convincing there.
I could not disagree more. I have no hobbies that do not correlate to my work because I'm a boring human. Just because I enjoy my work primarily. That's the main driver there. Any final thoughts for you on the NBA Finals based on what we saw across those 5 thrilling games?
Yeah, the Nuggets are a very good team. Miami, I don't know if Jimmy Butler just got worn out or what, but he refused to shoot the ball in game 5. It was very, very frustrating. I know Jeff Van Gundy was talking about it during the broadcast, put a lot of pressure on the role players to just sort of create shots. I also kind of think that Miami's offensive schemes just didn't really lead to a whole lot. So, I mean, congrats to the Nuggets. They deserve to win. It was fun to track Miami, but it's one of those situations where sometimes the underdog story is fun to root for until it's not. And then it's like, maybe if we had like Boston or Philly or, another team to give Denver a run, that could have been cool, but it is what it is. And we're on to next season.
Yeah, the Jimmy stuff was weird to the point where at the end of the game, I was shocked when he did shoot. Like he made those back-to-back threes on those. I expect him to pass on both those because of the way it had been going to that point. Again, I'm not a huge NBA observer, but like it was definitely odd. I can't blame him based on the burden he carried based on having an ankle sprain as well. But it was fun to educate my wife on the Nikola Jokic as a child pictures. I think that made it all worth it. Showing her the Taco Bell commercial that ran when he was drafted, which made me want a quesarito pretty badly. But congrats to the Nuggets, as you said. And we'll see what happens next year too.
It's also one of those, like, you can't knock Jimmy because they wouldn't have been there without him. And then it just goes back to like the LeBron situation where people cite how many losses he has in the finals. And it's like, in some realities, not making the NBA finals is better than losing in the NBA finals. So I just,
Is it better to struggle in game 5 of the NBA finals or to observe from your couch as you've been sitting there for a couple months without making the playoffs? Who can say? Not I. We're going to dive on into this U.S. Open, outline a course we have not seen on the PGA Tour before, I guess, or in a major before, outline what to know about that and Brandon's favorite bets over at FanDuel Sportsbook. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. If you want some thoughts on Game 5 in the NHL for tonight, we did talk to Austin Swaim about that yesterday. There's a timestamp for that in the episode over on wherever you get your podcast. The episode description will have a timestamp for that if you want to skip ahead to the NHL Game 5 discussion between the Panthers and the Golden Knights. Get that wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check us out over on the FanDuel YouTube page. If you like what you hear, leave us a thumbs up on YouTube or a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Are you looking to have a stake in the U.S. Open all weekend long? Well, FanDuel has you covered with the PGA Eagle Daily Fantasy Contest, which is now live. Test your knowledge of the PGA Tour by putting together a 6-person lineup while staying under the salary cap and using FanDuel's live scoring feature. Follow along as you compete for a share of $350,000, with first place taking home $100K, all for just a $9 entry fee. Whether it's household names like Scotty Scheffler and Brooks Koepka or your favorite underdog, they tee off on Thursday. Plenty of options to fill out a lineup as you compete for first place. Thursday will be here before you know it. So submit your lineups on FanDuel today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. Let's dig in now to the U.S. Open, Brandon, talking here first about the course. It is at Los Angeles Country Club, the first time it has hosted a PGA Tour event. It has been the host of a couple of 3 USGA events. I don't know anything about those, but maybe you do. So what should we know about the course Los Angeles CC based on yardage, based on research you've done, we can apply to this year's field?
Yeah, so the one you'll probably hear cited a decent amount is the 2017 Walker Cup, which is it's the U.S. versus Great Britain and Ireland, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Team Great Britain and Ireland. And the only relevant players who are in the field, and by I mean relevant, I just mean like the only players in the field who actually played there were Colin Morikawa and the favorite Scotty Scheffler, which I think might be. I don't think we need more reasons to like Scotty Scheffler, but the fact that he has that, I guess 6 years ago he played here in a team.
Hey, worked for Matt Fitzpatrick last year at the U.S.
Yeah.
Open.
Yeah, it's one of those situations, but yeah, we're not working with a whole lot of like tangible knowledge about LACC. We know it's a long par 70, so scores are going to be high or low, or I view it as high. I think most people do, but point being, it's going to play tough relative to par, which is typical for a U.S. Open. The past 3 winners of U.S. Opens have all been 6 under par, and I think it was 13 under when it was at Pebble Beach, and then maybe 1 under. But it's going to be tough. True birdies are going to be hard to find. So all that's really going to do is change the amount of fantasy points we get for our DFS lineups. It's all the same for all the golfers. This course starts out with basically 2 par 4.5s. It's going to be a scoreable par 5. So if your guys are starting off on the first, you're going to want to see a birdie there, but they might give it right back on the second. And I think that's just kind of the way that this course might play. It's some gettable holes, but a lot of ways to get into some sort of trouble. I mean, it looks like a really cool golf course. There's undulating fairways, which is always intriguing. So placement off the tee probably going to matter, but it also might be one of those where if you put it 3 yards left or right of the target that you're aiming for, could be in trouble. That could frustrate some golfers. That's also something that specifically at U.S. Opens, I think we need to keep in mind, is that some of these guys might get a little bit flustered with the setup. So maybe, if that's the kind of narratives that you like to play, go for it. But the 2 obvious names there being Jon Rahm and Tyrrell Hatton, both in really good shape this week. So I'm not going to play that angle because I like both for this week. But if you go with a hole-by-hole breakdown of the course based on the scorecard that's up on the U.S. Open website and compare each hole to the average of the same par, we're getting 10 of 18 holes that are at least 10% longer than the average hole of that same par. So you can look at overall distance always. That's like the easiest thing to do. But 10 holes are like noticeably longer than, a usual par 4, par 5, that kind of thing. And there's some long par 3s. 2 of them are over 280 yards. 6 par 4s, at least 480. There's a par 5 that can play like 625. So it's going to be, and I have this all up in an article on numberFire if you want to check it out, kind of get some context. But, I'm seeing some conflicting reports or, analysis on how important driving distance is going to be at this setup. I think it's going to matter because it's just the amount of holes where it's, going to play long. accuracy, I think, is going to matter. But yeah, it's kind of wide open, so you don't have to be super precise. But I think that if you're really short off the tee, you're gonna have a hard time. So it's a lot of guesswork, a lot of flyovers. There's a lot of good content out there on the course. Golf Digest has a good overview. The U.S. Open website itself has some like virtual flyovers of everything, so you can really get a feel for how this thing's going to play. And I think the one thing that we need to factor in here is there's a lot of those dry riverbeds. It's going to be, it's going to be tough whenever you miss in the wrong spots. And I think that it might just be, the guys who don't have those one or two blow up holes that ultimately emerge. But that's kind of what we're looking at this week.
Now, you discussed how there are multiple ways to view distance, given that placement should matter, but also they're really long holes. And that introduces more variance into the discussion. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you, from a process perspective, do you tend to play things differently when there are unknowns like we have for this week? Like, are you less willing to make bets than you typically would be because there's more variance there, need a bigger edge versus the market? How do you kind of handle things in situations like this?
Yeah, so a small part of my process is factoring in estimated course fit to alter what strokes gained inputs I'm putting into my model before running it. It's obviously harder to do that this week because we don't know what actually is mattered here statistically, and that's how I view things rather than just assumptions. This week we have to make those assumptions, or we just run it without any assumptions at all. And I tried my best to have some assumptions, but sort of on the low end, so not any big swings here, because I do think that all types of players can play well here in theory. I just think that the bigger hitters are going to have more of an advantage, which is almost always the case anyway. But typically when we get a first-time course, I am a little more timid to dive in. But if anyone's ever listened to the show, they know that I'm a little more conservative, than some others might be. That being said, we know U.S. Opens are tough. We know that they're long. We know that they rotate courses. We know that at majors, the best players tend to separate. So it's not like I'm treating it just like, hey, there's this new course, kind of a weak field on the PGA Tour, don't really know what to expect. So I'm a little bit more, I'm a little bit above that level of like skepticism in the way that I'm viewing things. And again, specifically, I feel like at US Opens, because of how tough they are, the best rise to the top. The past winners at US Opens, Matt Fitzpatrick, great, we know he's a great player.
Best golfer in the world. I agree.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
If anyone's not watching, Jim's wearing a nice Northwestern hat, which he
for
claims
that specific reason.
Matt Fitzpatrick. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Fitzpatrick, Jon Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau, Gary Woodland, Brooks Koepka twice, Dustin Johnson, Jordan Spieth, the past U.S. Open winners. And the name that might jump out there is Gary Woodland, but entering, he had a 50-round moving average, according to Data Golf, of about 1.3 strokes gained per round, adjusted for field strength. For context, this year, that's like Justin Thomas or Cam Young, two guys who would not truly shock anyone. Are they golfing their best? No. But again, it's U.S. Open. I think it's pretty clear that overall game is going to separate more than trying to nail the right proximity ranges for this week. So that's basically how I've been working with things for about probably like 2 years now, not trying to get too detailed with the stats I'm looking at. So I feel pretty good, all things considered, for this week.
So you want guys in great overall form. I think the headliner there is Scottie Scheffler. It's pretty obvious. He's 7-1 to win at FanDuel Sportsbook, and he's there despite the fact his putting has been iffy. So does that prevent Scheffler from being a value for you at 7-1? And what's your view of the rest of the favorites at FanDuel Sportsbook right now?
So the way that my model works is I just take round by round scoring and do some adjustments from there for field strength, recency, whatever else that goes in there. So it doesn't necessarily factor out putting. It doesn't necessarily bump guys up for better tee to green or ball striking numbers, anything like that, because I like to take samples from multiple tours, and we just don't have the reliable data from other tours. So again, I don't factor out putting. So for Scheffler, all of his putting, we'll call them woes, are factored in. But in theory, I'm using a long enough sample where things smooth out long term. Now, I've also done some research on putting, and the reason that I feel pretty good about not trying to make a more tee to green based model is that we can actually, first of all, putting stats, they're not random and they will stabilize over time. So by using a large sample kind of just, compensates for the fact that putting does sort of ebb and flow. But we also can look specifically at more or less putting from within 15 feet. That's the most predictive range. If you had to pick one range, it'd be like 5 to 10 feet. It's a good sample of putts that are makeable, and they separate out the best golfers. But if you look at putting stats from within 15 feet, Scheffler's at 24th percentile this season from within 15 feet. That is the main concern. That being said, it's not like he's dreadful and can never make a putt. We know that that's not how putting works, and especially with Scheffler, he can definitely look like he's never going to miss. Similar like a Brooks Koepka in majors, it feels like he's never missing an 8-footer. But if he does putt well, he can win this thing by multiple shots. That's how good the tee to green game is. But mathematically speaking, whenever you simulate stuff out, if you use individual player deviations, it's a low standard deviation because he's so consistent with the tee to green game, but the putting has not really spiked in a positive sense. It's been kind of down very recently, but it's not like he's losing 10 shots putting every single round.
He tried at the Memorial. He tried, but that's like an outlier.
Yeah. So he has a really high floor, and so just mathematically, Jon Rahm, for example, is a more volatile player than Scottie Scheffler.
Mm-hmm.
All of that being said, I have his expected win odds at plus 720. So when he was plus 750, I thought he was fine. Frankly, I'm not going to fight anyone who wants to bet him at plus 700. That's, again, you can rerun the simulations over 10,000 times and he might be plus 700 exactly, whatever. So for me, Scheffler's fine. His tee to green game is so dominant right now that all he has to do is putt okay, and he realistically could win. And if he hits a few long putts, this could be Scottie Scheffler's major to lose.
And if you have like a boost offered to you on someone in the field, Scheffler seems like the prime candidate, because the difference between like 7-1 and 9-1, if it's like a plus 200 boost, like that's a big difference in implied odds. So and he'd be the first guy I would think about there too.
And 7-1 is looking like a nice number too. I'll just say that much compared to some other,
not surprised, not surprised by any means. So Scheffler, not quite a value by your numbers. Is there anybody who is a value, any outrights you like for this week at FanDuel right now?
Yeah, I like two guys. Jon Rahm at 11-1 and Xander Schauffele at 19-1. I'm sorry, but no one can really build a case against Xander that I will hear. And just, often analysis around major time is, well, I don't like to bet guys who haven't won a major. It's like, how do you win a major? It's not like only people who've won a major can win a major. It's just not how it works. So I always find that a bit funny. But with Rahm, it's starting to feel like he's a bit forgotten based on how good Scheffler has been. Rahm is not very far removed from winning every tournament he played in. So it's just kind of crazy where he is. Now he's a great putter overall. But he's second in the field in strokes gained ball striking over the past 50 rounds, according to Data Golf, if you remove the small samples for the Live Tour guys right now. That being said, he is nearly a full shot worse in ball striking, which is strokes gained off the tee and strokes gained approach, than Scottie Scheffler. So again, Scheffler is that good right now with his driver and his irons, which is why he's deservedly the favorite. But Rahm is second in that department, and he has great underlying putting stats. He's a 70th percentile putter from within 15 feet. I don't really know how you make a case against Jon Rahm other than the fact that he's not Scottie Scheffler, but it's long term, their strokes gain numbers are almost identical, and I'm getting a much better number on Jon Rahm. It's put together, packaged a little bit differently because Rahm's a little bit worse with the ball striking, and a lot better with the putter. But I'll take I'll take it.
It's different routes to the same destination, basically.
And it's like, would it surprise anyone if John Rahm had a better tee to green week than Scotty Scheffler? No. Like, and honestly, like the thing with my model is it basically just says, here's how good guys have been. I make some adjustments for how the course might play that week. And then it says, here's where guys probably should be. And it's a reminder that John Rahm is not an afterthought.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he's an afterthought because he's, second on the odds. Like I'm not trying to make it sound like he's 50 to 1. But they're very similar, and I'd rather just take the better number on John Rahm.
Let's talk about Xander now. Xander Schauffele, as you mentioned, 19 to 1 at FanDuel. That number is shortened throughout the week. Where is the point where you back off? Because it's been pretty steady 19 to 1. I think that it's held there, and it probably will be there when people listen to this show. But how much more value is there to squeeze out of Schauffele at his current number?
So I have him specifically. Let's see here. I have him at 17 to 1.
Okay, so there's still a decent amount of wiggle room there on Schauffele to still be a value. What puts him up there for you? Is it just like the overall form being sick that kind of puts Schauffele in play for you?
So yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with I just again, I don't always just agree with the model, but the model is here to tell me who's good at golf and how often they should win this particular tournament against this particular field. And then I just go from there and make my own decisions. But Xander, 5 straight top 18s at majors, 6 straight top 25s in his stroke play events entering. And he's a top 5 iron player in the field over the past 50 rounds, according to Data Golf, which is one of the things that has always kind of had Xander a step below the superstars was the iron play. Now he's really, really up there. And it just is going to be a matter of when he puts it all together in the same week. We get the California narrative, although I will say just kind of a small caveat to that California narrative. A lot of the California courses are POA greens. This week it's bent grass, just something to throw in there. But I would be willing to hear any arguments against Xander other than the fact that he shrinks in the moment, because I don't think that's the case. I think he just has had a lot of bad variance on his end. And he
won a gold medal. You can't say he shrinks.
I think he's eventually it's going to go his way.
Yeah, I agree.
If you put yourself in top 15, top 20 contention, all it's going to take is a few more putts, one more break going your way. And I don't think people realize sometimes how much that impacts who wins a golf tournament.
Right. So the outrights Brandon likes here: John Rahm 11 to 1, Xander Schauffele 19 to 1. You said it's not really a week for long shots. Anyone you like there, or fully avoiding those and sticking with Rahm and Xander?
So I'm going to go basically heavy at Rahm and Xander, and then the other markets. But 3 other names showing fair value that I think are noteworthy: Tony Finau at 37, Jason Day at 50, and then our guy Wyndham Clark 85 to 1. Big hitter. Great game right now. I'm fine with Clark at a top 10, which we'll get into here in a second. But those 3 names I think are worth monitoring, and I'll be fine to put some partial units on those. But if I was really telling anyone anything, I'm focused on Rahm and Xander this week, I think.
I usually wait till I talk to you to place bets outside of 3 balls because I just take whatever Data Golf says is a value there. I did make 2 gut bets this week. One is Wyndham to win. The other one, I don't know if I want to disclose to you because I'm a little bit ashamed about it, but
is it to win?
Yeah, I did slack you about this person, so you can guess it, but
Scheffler just moved to plus 650.
Oh well, alas, it wasn't a value at 7 to 1 anyway. If you look at the screen, you can see who I am referencing, but it's Mito Pereira.
Oh, geez. I see the case for it, but
I know. Can you though, or are you just making me feel better about myself?
Great.
This is a do as I say, not as I do situation. I should be clear about that. I'm not recommending Wyndham and Mito, but you.
This is one of those things though. If Mito closed out the PGA, everyone would view him differently in majors. That one hole changes. He'd be a major champion, and to a lot of people,
he will be after Sunday. But
yeah. But I just think that we sometimes we need to be a little bit little fairer in the first time. I don't think it would be shocking if we got a first time major winner this week due to the course, but
yeah, I mean, between Wyndham and Mito, there's like 60%
sure.
odds that happens.
Yeah.
So, I agree. What about the non-outrights? Anything stand out to you there?
Well, Wyndham Clark is, I mean, if people are listening in, maybe his top 10 odds have shortened drastically, but he was plus 700 to top 10.
Oh.
Which is a really good number on FanDuel Sportsbook.
Brooks just shortened. There you go. Someone heard Brooks. So,
but again,
really?
Clark is phenomenal right now. He is 13th in the field. This field, which is a major field, in true strokes gained over the past 50 rounds, according to Data Golf. He is 16th in distance, 35th in putting. He's really one of the best golfers in the field, sort of in the world right now. And it's a really, really good numbers, like good numbers for him, in any market, whether that's outright, which I love the optimism. Top 10 though, still really good. I have him around plus 550 to top 10 this week. And then basically just some, I love majors because we always get the props and we get the nationality props. I just love those because they're such natural groups, and I hate trying to go from like, here's the groups of like 4 to 6 names, and then I'm like putting them in my spreadsheet, and I'm like, who's in this one? It's so much easier and so much more fun. But top Englishman, Tyrrell Hatton plus 280. I love Tyrrell Hatton right now. I think we're getting a little bit of past winner. See scrolling.
It's way at the bottom. I don't know if it's alphabetical order. I couldn't figure it out, but I got there eventually.
I think Matt Fitzpatrick in this market's a little bit overvalued due to having won last year. I do fear Justin Rose a bit. We're on Team Rose right now. We've been all over Team Rose, but I don't think either of us have anything bad to say about Tyrrell Hatton. Really has no shortcomings in his profile. He's a plus in all 4 strokes gained categories. Just so good right now across the board. I'm seeing value in this market. Just below that, I believe it should be.
Thank you for the guidance.
Top Swede, Vincent Norman plus 200. Big hitter, sort of I don't want to be dismissive, but kind of a head-to-head against Alex Noren, who I don't think is a great course fit necessarily, unless short game is really what ultimately matters here. And then last one, I think, is at the very bottom, top lefty.
Oh,
yeah.
Like
not
that.
A nationality, but Brian Harmon. He is the favorite at minus 120. He's just versus Phil Mickelson and Hank Lebioda. We like Hank plenty, but Brian Harmon's a really good golfer. My model's showing value on Brian Harmon in that market pretty clearly. So I feel good with those ones.
And Harmon is a guy who can gain strokes off the tee despite not being long. And I think that's typically pretty valuable, especially for an event like this where it may be long, but he can place it well and stuff like that. So I think that, archetype might not be there, but he's overcome that everywhere else. So I think that makes sense for him.
Yeah. And I don't know if the archetype's necessarily there for
Phil. Yeah.
Although something we didn't talk about with the whole golf news is that it's happening right before the US Open.
Yeah.
And that's the one Phil needs. So
I think Phil's been feeling himself. So the confidence will not be low coming into this event. We can say that based on his Twitter activity. I feel like he's feeling himself quite a bit. So, there's that at least. Okay. So the non-outrights Brandon likes: Wyndham Clark top 10, 7-1, Tyrrell Hatton top Englishman plus 280, Vincent Norman top Swede at 2-1. And then the top lefty, Brian Harmon at minus 120. Any final thoughts, Brandon, before we close up shop and send off everyone to fill out their bet slips for this week?
It's a major, lot of good names. At the top, if you have a strong suspicion, if you like what you're seeing from certain golfers, I really can't talk you out of almost anyone at the top of the board, but I know it's fun to bet the long shots. I'm sure people tuning in or just trying to get some extra action because it's a major, just look at who wins majors and try to protect yourself a little bit. I don't want to talk anyone out of like hitting a long shot, but I think this week especially is going to be, there's so many guys in good form right now that for one of the long shots to float to the top, I would be astonished. So
it's tough to top when there's a list of Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Wyndham Clark, Mito Pereira. It's tough to top all four of those guys. So I get why you're wary of the long shots.
Yeah. I haven't seen a field. Oh wait, here it is. Big guns versus the field.
Okay.
Brooks, John Rahm, Rory, and Scheffler plus 235 versus the field.
Okay. I'd rather just bet Mito outright. Again, this is not on Brandon. This is on me. And this is not a recommendation. This is me being dumb. And I want to be fully transparent about that. So do as I say, not as I do. Check out Brandon on Twitter at Gdula13. As he mentioned, all of the simulations are up over on numberFire.com. He went through the course data there as well. Find that over at numberFire.com. Find his work there. We'll also talk about the DFS side of things over on the FanDuel YouTube page, noon Eastern on Tuesday, and then up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. But Brandon, thank you for swinging by for today as always, and I'll talk to you again in less than 1 hour.
Sounds good. Looking forward to talking more golf.
All righty. Find Brandon on Twitter at Gdula13. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets for the U.S. Open and for Game 5 between Vegas and Florida. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.